The road in Montana wound serpentine after serpentine road, as if the mountain itself refused to let go of those who dared to climb so high. The air was clear, almost crystalline, and with each turn the car seemed to plunge deeper into silence. The snow lay in an even layer on the branches of the spruce trees, and with each movement of the branches, small white flakes fell onto the glass, as if someone from above was checking to see if you were still alive down there. Simon was silent. Allison was checking the map on her phone, but the signal had died about 20 minutes ago. "Looks like we're heading the right way," she said. "Just a couple of miles left. If this is even a road," he muttered. "I feel like we entered a different time." She chuckled. "You were just tired." "No," he looked at her. "It's just too quiet here, even for the mountains." A few minutes later, they noticed an old sign by the side of the road. The metal letters were faded, but they could still make out the words, "Ridgeview Lodge, Est, 1893. Below it hung a small plaque with faded inscriptions. "Don't to whistle until you pass the turn." Allison leaned closer to the glass. "Strange warning. Local superstition," Simon replied. But for some reason he also stopped talking. As they passed the sign, the wind hit the car, and a short whistle came from the depths of the ravine, as if someone wanted to check whether they were breaking the rule. Simon instinctively slammed on the brakes and glanced in the mirrors. There was no one behind them, only their tracks in the fresh snow. "Go ahead," Allison said quietly. I'm cold." He turned on the heating, gripped the steering wheel, and didn't look back. The hotel stood on the edge of a cliff, a massive building of dark stone, with arched windows and a sign whose letters were illuminated by a faint, almost sickly light. A man in an old-fashioned doorman's uniform stood at the entrance. He didn't move until they came closer, then simply nodded and opened the door. The interior smelled of polished wood, fireplace, and something old, as if time had truly stood still. Black and white photographs hung on the walls, people in period clothing, guests looking straight into the camera. Allison ran her hand along the wooden reception desk. "It's beautiful here, in its own way." "In its own way?" Simon repeated, noticing a woman emerging from around the corner. She was short, with gray hair pulled back into a bun. Her voice was soft but expressionless. "Welcome to Ridgeview Lodge. Did you register in advance?" "Yes, the name is Allison," the woman interrupted. "Room 307, third floor." Simon winced. "Wait, where are you from?" "But you booked under that name," she replied calmly and smiled. Allison nodded as if nothing strange had happened, but Simon noticed her left eyebrow twitch. The woman handed over a key. Not a card, but a real key, heavy, brass, with engraved numbers. "Take the stairs, the elevator isn't working yet. And if you hear someone calling your name, don't answer. Sound can sometimes play tricks here." Allison gave a short, strained laugh. When they reached the third floor, the hallway greeted them with silence and an old carpet that muffled their footsteps. Landscape paintings hung on the walls, all identical, snow-capped peaks in a small house below. Only in one of them did Allison notice something strange. She seemed to be able to see the silhouette of a woman in the window of the house. "Nice," she said, but quickly turned away. Simon was silent. He felt a slight pressure in his ears, as if the air were thicker here. The room was spacious but cold. The fireplace was built of rough stone, and a bed with a carved headboard stood in the corner. The window looked directly onto the abyss. "Well, there you go," Allison said, dropping the suitcase. "We even have a view." "Death to death," Simon muttered. "What?" "Nothing," he said, walking to the window. "It's just weird." Outside, the wind hummed, as if someone was talking quietly. Allison came up behind him, put her arm around his waist, and whispered, "You need to rest." He smiled but didn't turn around. "Are you sure this is where we were supposed to go? I thought you liked the mountains." "I like them. It's just that this hotel is kind of wrong." She turned to him, frowning. "Simon, you've been looking for too much weirdness lately." He was about to answer, but noticed her reflection in the mirror opposite. Allison was standing next to him, but her reflection was slightly delayed. Just a split second. He blinked. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, I just imagined it." A few minutes later, she lay down on the bed and fell asleep almost instantly. Simon sat by the fireplace, listening to the crackling of the logs. The wind made the window sashes shake. For a moment, he thought he heard someone walking down the hallway outside the door. Slow, confident steps. He approached and listened. Silence. When he returned to the chair, Allison quietly said something in her sleep. Her voice was hoarse, as if it wasn't hers. He shouldn't have come here. Simon froze. What? She rolled over onto her side, still asleep. Allison, he whispered. She opened her eyes and looked at him, puzzled. What? You just said I was sleeping. Simon. He didn't answer. He just glanced at the window. A fog was already rising outside, as if the hotel was hiding from the world. He didn't answer, only glanced at the window. The fog was already rising outside. Soft, dense, as if alive, it settled on the windowsill and slowly crept upward, obscuring the silhouette of the mountains. Simon peered into the whitish haze and suddenly realized he couldn't hear a sound. No wind, no birds, no rustling of the pines. Nothing. Even the sound of their old car in the parking lot vanished, as if it had never existed. Strange, he said quietly. What? Allison responded. Hear that? What exactly? Exactly. She listened. The room felt hermetically sealed, as if cut off from the outside world. Even the old clock in the corner ticked with an unnaturally muffled sound, as if it were under a glass bell jar. Allison hugged herself, though the room wasn't too cold. Probably just tired, she said. Simon nodded, but his gaze was still fixed on the window. The fog was thickening, obscuring the glass, and it seemed as if someone was standing behind it. A vague silhouette, indistinct but very noticeable. They went down to the restaurant for dinner. Downstairs, there were only two other couples and the same manager, a man of about 50 with an impeccably shaven face and a vacant expression. He seemed oblivious to them, though he spoke evenly, politely, mechanically. There aren't many guests today, Allison remarked, pouring wine. Maybe it was not the season. In the mountains? Early November? She smiled. Perfect time for such trips. Simon didn't answer. He felt the lamplight was too dim, and the shadows on the walls were moving a little too quickly. Every time he looked up, the shadows froze, returning to their normal form. Are you listening to me? Allison asked. Yes. Sure. She fell silent. For a moment, she simply looked at him. Then she leaned over and whispered, Did you get up last night? No. Are you sure? Absolutely. Allison nodded silently, took a sip of wine, and looked into the corner. Then, she said quietly, Who was standing by the bed? Simon looked up. What? I woke up in the middle of the night. You were sleeping next to me, and someone was standing at the foot of the bed. Just standing there. Maybe I imagined it. I saw him. Simon. He was in a dark suit. No face. Just a silhouette. He slowly put down his glass, trying to speak calmly. Why didn't you tell me before? I thought it was a dream, but then I noticed. She leaned a little closer. Footprints by the window. Wet, as if someone had been standing barefoot. That night, Simon couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Allison slept restlessly, occasionally twitching, as if she were hearing something in her sleep. He got up and went to the window. The fog hadn't cleared. On the contrary, it had grown thicker, now touching the glass, as if trying to penetrate. In the window, his reflection, he saw himself and Allison behind him on the bed. But in the reflection, she was lying facing him, although in reality, she was sleeping, turned toward the wall. He blinked. The reflection had returned to normal. Simon took a deep breath and ran a hand over his face. Nerves, he thought. It was all just fatigue. Too many hours on the road. He returned to bed and tried to close his eyes. But then he heard someone knock softly on the door. Once, then twice. He stood up. Who is there? Silence. Only the roar of blood in his ears. He opened the door. No one was there. Only an empty hallway, dim lamplight, the smell of old carpet. A lamp was burning at the far end of the hallway, and for a second he thought he saw someone standing beneath it, watching. But he blinked. No one was there. He closed the door, turned toward the bed, and froze. Allison sat, looking straight at him. Who came? She asked quietly. Nobody. I imagined it. No, I didn't. I saw a shadow under the door. In the morning, they went down to breakfast. The same administrator was sitting at the table, as if he hadn't left since the evening before. He smiled when they entered, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "How did you sleep?" "Great," Simon said. Allison remained silent. When they stepped out onto the veranda, the fog had almost cleared, but the air was strangely thick, sticky. The trees were motionless. The grass felt like plastic. Simon noticed a dent in the railing, as if fingers had dug in there, leaving a mark. "Do you see it?" he asked. "What?" He wanted to show her, but the marks were gone. Later, as he passed the reception desk, he heard it talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, they checked in yesterday." "Yes, a couple. Room 30. Pause. "No, sir, I don't think they figured it out yet." Simon froze. "What didn't you understand?" he asked. The administrator slowly looked up, still wearing that same obligatory smile. "Excuse me." That evening, Allison sat in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. Simon came over and put his arm around her shoulders. "I'll leave tomorrow." "Okay." "Why?" "I want to go home." She nodded, but her gaze remained in the reflection. "You know," she said suddenly, "sometimes I feel like it's not me looking out of the mirror." "What do you mean?" "Well, that it is someone else." He wanted to laugh, but couldn't. "You were just in an impressionable mood," he said. Allison put down her brush and turned to face him. "Then why did I just blink in the mirror and you didn't?" He glanced sharply into the mirror. Their reflection stood motionless, completely motionless. Then Allison's reflection slowly turned her head and smiled, a little wider than her real lips allowed. Simon instinctively recoiled. When he looked again, the reflection was normal. "We leave tomorrow morning," he said. She didn't answer. She just glanced at the window. The fog was returning. The Montana night seemed to dissolve the boundaries between reality and something else. The fog rose higher, thickly enveloping the old hotel, and the world outside the windows vanished. Simon stood by the glass, peering into the thick white haze, when he heard a soft rustling sound behind him, like someone running a finger along the wooden headboard. He turned around. Allison was asleep, or at least she should have been. He moved closer, listening. Her breathing became ragged, her lips moving as if she were muttering something. At first, it was incoherent sounds, but then he made out words. "Simon, open the door." "What?" he whispered. "Open the door." They were waiting. He recoiled. The voice wasn't hers, lower, as if coming not from her throat, but from the depths of the room. Allison lay motionless, her eyes closed. Simon switched on the lamp. The light flickered dimly, and at that moment the television in the corner clicked softly and lit up on its own. The screen showed snow, white noise, thin stripes, distorted shadows. No signal, but amid the chaos, a face flashed. He didn't have time to make out it, but it was too close to the camera, as if someone was looking straight into their room. Simon rushed to the TV and pulled the plug. The noise didn't. He stopped. The white stripes continued to dance. He pulled the cable out of the wall, and only then did the screen go dark. "Allison, wake up." His voice trembled. His wife slowly opened her eyes. She stared through him for a few seconds, then focused and quietly asked, "Why are you so pale?" He didn't tell anyone. He said everything was fine, that maybe there was a short circuit. But his hands were shaking. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the floor, and suddenly noticed a wet footprint on the carpet. From the door to the bed, small, bare footprints. He looked up sharply. The door was closed. The lock was intact. "Allison, did you get up during the night?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I didn't. To sleep well. I dreamed that someone was knocking on the window." He walked up to the window. The glass was fogged up. On the inside, and on it, a handprint. Clear, wet, as if someone had stood there and breathed. He wiped the imprint with his sleeve, trying not to show his fear. "We retired," he said. "It's just fatigue." They lay down, but sleep didn't come. The clock on the bedside table stopped at exactly 3:07. Simon noticed, but didn't say anything. That night, he was awakened by a strange sound, quiet, metallic. At first, it sounded like dripping water, but then he realized it was the radio on the table that had turned on by itself. There was a hissing sound, short clicks, then a female voice, distorted by static. "Stay." He ran over and turned it off, but the voice lingered for another 3 seconds, unrelated. When he turned back to the bed, Allison was sitting staring at the wall. "Did you hear that?" he asked. She nodded silently. "Simon," she said quietly, "I can remember how we got here." He froze. "What do you mean?" "I remember the road, the fog, but the hotel, this room." She ran her hand over the bedspread, as if feeling it for the first time. "I don't remember how we entered." He sat down next to her, trying to find the words, but he couldn't find the time. A light knock came from under the bed. 2 knocks, then another. He knelt down and peered in. There was nothing there, just a black crack and old floorboards, but the smell of damp grew stronger. Suddenly, Allison said sharply, "Don't open the door." He looked up. She was asleep again. Simon moved to the wall, pressing his palms to his temples. His breathing was ragged. The mirror opposite the bed reflected only him, but as soon as he turned away, he heard a rustling sound behind him. He glanced up sharply. The reflection had changed. Someone was standing next to his wife. The next morning, the hotel looked as if nothing had happened. The fog had cleared. The sun was breaking through the clouds. The air was crisp, almost pleasant. But it all felt unreal, as if nature itself was pretending. Simon packed quickly, almost silently. Allison sat on the bed, staring into space. There was no fear on her face, only a strange calm, as if everything that had happened that night hadn't to happen to them. "Hurry, please," he said, checking the bag. We're leaving now?" She nodded without moving. He came closer and touched her shoulder. "Allison." She turned to face him. Her gaze was empty, slightly glassy. "I told you," she said quietly. "What?" "They don't want us to leave." He jerked his hand away. "Stop it. Just pull yourself together." She stood up, obediently walked to the mirror and fixed her hair. "Okay," she said evenly. "If that is how you want it." A few minutes later, they were already descending the stairs. The woman from reception was back. Same smile, same dress, but her gaze was more attentive now. "Leaving already?" she asked. Simon nodded. "Yes, the things are in the car." She looked down at the registration log. "That is odd," she said after a short pause. "I don't see your entry. Are you sure you stayed with us?" He felt a chill in his chest. "We arrived 2 days ago. 3rd floor, room 307, 3rd floor?" She asked again. "No one has lived there for several years." Allison was silent. Simon took a step back, as if suddenly jolted, and almost dragged his wife toward the door. He didn't turn around or answer. They stepped outside, the wind buffeting his face, and it seemed to him as if the hotel behind him was taller than it had been the night before. He unlocked the car, helped Allison in, and got behind the wheel. We're going," he said firmly. "Right now." She didn't answer. She sat, looking out the window. The road down led in a serpentine fashion, through the pines. The wheels crunched on the gravel. Simon felt his arms tense, as if the car itself were resisting movement. He glanced in the rearview mirror, and his heart sank. Someone was sitting in the backseat, a shadowy figure, like the reflection of someone leaning forward. The eyes weren't visible, but the silhouette was clear. He blinked. Nothing. He took a deep breath. Just stress, he thought. Just fog and a sleepless night. But the air in the car grew colder. He felt as if someone was breathing down his neck. He turned around. Allison was still looking out the window, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw the corner of her mouth twitch. Unnatural. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Of course," she replied. We almost home." "Home?" He glanced at her, but she turned her head slowly, and her smile widened. We're already here, Simon." He blinked, and realized the road ahead of them had changed. Instead of a mountain, a serpentine road, a narrow driveway surrounded by black trees. Headlights reflected in the windows of houses. He slowed down. "What is this?" Allison stared straight ahead. "You wanted to leave," she said. "But not everything can be left behind." The engine stalled. The headlights went out. Simon exhaled and turned the ignition key, but nothing happened. From the darkness outside, a footstep was heard. 1, 2. Someone was walking around the car. He turned his head and saw his reflection in the glass. Only the reflection was smiling. He heard breathing behind him. He turned around. "Allison," he whispered. She replied quietly, "I told you, they just wanted you to stay."